All right, so out of the target round, I chose to present problem number 4 because as far as I know, this is the first instance in this contest you guys have seen a probability question. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what exactly that is and how we would go about doing this if you weren't familiar about probability before. So here's the question. Thomas rolls a standard 6-sided die until the number rolled is a perfect square, at which point he stops. What is the probability he rolls the die exactly 3 times? Express your answer as a common fraction. Okay, so probability might be a new concept to some of you, but there are some instances in which you may already know some concepts about it. For example, I'm sure you guys know that when you flip a coin, there's a 50% chance that it lands on heads and a 50% chance that it lands on tails. And for example, when it's like the weather forecast, you might say there's a 30% chance of rain. And what those mean, these percentages, means that if you keep doing this multiple times, for example, if you keep flipping a coin over and over multiple times, 50% of those will come up as heads, and about 50% of those will come out as tails. So probability is the likelihood that this event you want will happen. And we typically express probabilities as a fraction. So 50% we could rewrite as 1/2. And if it's, for example, a 30% chance of rain, we would rewrite that as 3/10 chance. So now let's take a look at this problem, the probability that he rolls the die exactly 3 times. So in our standard 6-sided die, we have the numbers 1 through 6. And each of these numbers comes up with probability of 1/6. So each number on the die has an equal chance of showing up. So all of these have probability of 1/6, and we're looking for the probability of him eventually rolling a perfect square. So the perfect squares are 1 and 4, and the others are not perfect squares. So an important question we have to ask ourselves is, if Thomas rolls 1 time, what is the probability that he gets a perfect square? And in order to do that, you just need to add up these two probabilities together. So 1/6 plus 1/6, that means the total probability is 1/3 that on any given roll, he will roll a perfect square. So now what happens if we put together multiple probabilities? So for example, one way I like to do this is by using a pie chart. That's a pretty terrible circle. Let me redraw that circle to be a little bit better. So here's a pie, and I'm going to cut up this pie. So we'll start off with the first roll. So we want Thomas to roll 3 times. We want the first 2 times to be not a perfect square. So the first 2 cannot be a perfect square, and only the last roll will be a perfect square, and that's when he stops. So if the probability of him rolling a perfect square is 1/3, then the probability of him not rolling a perfect square is the sum of these probabilities, which is 2/3. So out of this pie, I can cut out 1/3 of it, and I can say he has a 2/3 probability that his first roll is not a perfect square. And then onto his next step, he also has a 2/3 probability then of not rolling a perfect square. So we're going to have to then cut out another 1/3 of this pie. So we divide the remainder of the pie into thirds, and we're going to take 2/3 of that pie. So now the probability of him not getting a perfect square 2 times in a row will be represented by this area. And now finally, the probability that he does get a perfect square on his 3rd roll is going to be 1/3. And so we can imagine taking the remainder of this pie and dividing that into thirds, and we're going to take 1/3 of that pie. So this proportion of the pie, this fraction of the pie, is the probability that we get this exact sequence of 3 rolls. So what is the probability? Well, we take 2/3 of the pie, and then we took out 2/3 of that portion, and then we took out 1/3 of the remaining portion. So you would multiply these probabilities together. And so when you do that, you get 4/27, which is the final answer.
Hey, this is Tim. Hope you're enjoying our videos. If so, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, turn on notifications, all that sort of thing. But what I'd really want to invite you to do is to send us an email at media@mathleague.org. Tell us which problems you'd like to see us cover next in our video series. Take care and see you in the next video.